Hello, and welcome to part 1 of Chapter 9, Managing Groups and Teams. The primary topic for part 1, group dynamics. So let's dive in. We're going to start by talking about what a group is. As it says, it's a collection of individuals who interact with each other to achieve common goals. Groups and teams are an essential component of an organization's success. Now, I use those two terms interchangeably. I do not differentiate group from team. As it says in the final bullet, being able to work in a group is a key skill for everyone. Employers want people who know how to collaborate well, who can get things done with other people. So what kinds of groups might you belong to in an organization? Well, there are two kinds. Informal groups are the ones where people are associated with each other in ways that aren't prescribed by the organization, by the formal organization. So this could be the folks that you have lunch with. This could be the folks that you are in a football pool with, the folks that you do yoga with, whatever, informal. Formal groups, on the other hand, are the ones, well, think of like departments, for example, or project groups at work. These are made up of managers, employees, maybe both, who have close associations with each other, and these groups tend to influence the behavior of individuals who are part of that group. When we talk about groups, specifically when we talk about temporary groups, we can talk about the stages or phases of group development. This first model that you're looking at was originally devised by a guy whose last name is Tuckman. He's a sociologist. He published this in 1965. And as you'll see, the first 4 stages or phases all end in ing. Well, all 5 do. They all end in ing. And the first 4 rhyme, which is every undergraduate's nightmare, particularly if you have to memorize these things. Good news for you, you don't need to memorize them. Let's talk about each of these stages. The first, forming. This is when you first get together. So think about, for example, you participating in a group project in class. That very first time that your group gets together, maybe you get to choose the members of your group or you're assigned. Regardless, you're getting together for the first time. People tend to be excited, at least optimistic about what they've been asked to do. They feel pretty good about the people they're going to be working with. They look around and they go, oh, yeah, I think these people seem decent. These people seem like the kind of folks who could get things done. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to do well, right? The goals, that first stage, trying to get to know each other and figuring out how we're going to get the work done. What do we have to do exactly? Who's going to do it? How's it going to get done? This takes us into the second stage, the storming stage. When you think about storming, you might think about fighting, although conflict isn't always aggressive like a fight would suggest, right? Sometimes we can be in conflict with other folks and they don't even know it. So I want you to keep that in mind as I talk about this. In this stage, participants typically shed their social facades. What do I mean by that? Well, when we first meet each other, typically human beings, we try to manage other people's impressions of us. We want them to think good things about us. We want them to think we're smart, that we're interesting, that we care, we're hardworking. And over time, as the pressures to manage impressions, the pressures to behave a certain way dissipate, we tend to become more authentic around people, to be our actual selves. And part of that might mean that we become more argumentative. We are more likely to openly disagree with people or disagree with them behind their backs. People begin to explore their power and influence. People trying to figure out who is going to get listened to in this group, who is going to get to dictate how the group moves forward, who has the expert power. In other words, Who knows the most about the topic? Who's the best writer? Who's the best presenter? Who's the most creative? So people start to flex and show other people basically what they've got. Discussions can become heated. Members can become defensive as they argue for their position, for example, competitive. Maybe you've got a couple people who are used to being in charge, or jealous, where maybe a group member feels as though they're not getting the attention that some of the other group members are getting. Sometimes group members will avoid conflict or maybe passive aggressive in the way they handle their feelings, going behind people's backs, for example, maybe going and talking to the instructor and saying, hey, so and so's not doing their share, instead of respectfully and diplomatically talking to the person with whom they have a conflict. They'll try to avoid actively needing to deal with it and maybe hoping that somebody else will do so for them. Honestly, this is the stage where most student project groups get stuck. And you might ask why. Well, it has a lot to do with the reality that for a lot of college students, they haven't yet learned how to effectively manage conflict, how to collaboratively manage conflict. They see conflict as a win-lose proposition, where if the other person wins, that means they have to lose, or vice versa. They haven't yet necessarily developed the skills to go for that win-win. And I don't mean a compromise. I mean a win-win where both parties in the conflict are equally happy with whatever the decision is to move forward. Compromising is not a win-win. Compromising is a lose-lose. When you compromise, you each give something up. Nobody gets what they want or what would fully satisfy them. So that's not a good way to manage conflict over the long run. Ultimately, if a group is to be at its best, if it's going to be a championship team, the group has to work its way through this stage effectively and not just sort of passively, aggressively, conflict avoidant, kind of just try to get the project done, get that paper written, get that presentation handled, and then get on with their lives. Instead, they've got to actually work through their disagreements. Disagreements often being a good indication of, hey, you know what, we could do this better, differently, more creatively. And when groups tackle those things head on, they ultimately typically produce better stuff. The next stage or phase is norming. Let's say we've got a group that's gotten through the storming phase effectively. Well, when they get into the norming stage, now people are more committed to each other and the group's goal. They find it pretty easy to establish their ground rules. For example, when we get together for a meeting, who does what? Does one person take minutes? Who keeps track of the time? The group tends to make big decisions, so the overall group will make the big decisions and then allow subgroups or individuals to handle the smaller decisions. And whoever's leading the group at this point should become more of a facilitator. In other words, they step back and let the group own more of what it's going to take in order to accomplish the group's goal. Assuming the group has made it through norming, they get to performing. This is the championship team. This is a team that is in the flow. Everything works. When disagreements arise, people handle it beautifully. They work through any of their conflict. They agree on better ways to move forward. So here, people are feeling great. The group is matured. It's more competent. Autonomous, meaning people know what their roles are. They know the decisions for which they can be responsible. And the group has more insights into how it works. Again, you might think of an athletic team to help you imagine this, one where everything is just clicking beautifully. That is a high-performing team. Well, of course, the same thing is possible within organizations, within work organizations. Now, remember, we're talking about temporary groups, ones that have a limited lifespan. It could be a semester, it could be a year, it could be less time, maybe a little bit more time. But the point is, it's temporary. It's not intended to go on and on and on. And so eventually we get to the adjourning phase. This is when the final project is turned in, the final presentation is given. It says here, an ideal way to close a group is to set aside time to debrief, to do what we call an after action review, to acknowledge each other and everyone's contributions, and to celebrate a job that's been well done. So, as I said, it's really common for groups to get stuck in the storming phase. What can they do to avoid getting stuck there? Now, it doesn't mean we don't have conflict. That's not the way the world works. In fact, without conflict, we don't have creativity. Without conflict, we don't come up with better ways to solve our problems. The first thing we need to do then is to normalize conflict, to make it so it's okay, so people are comfortable with conflicts, that people recognize, well, conflict is what helps us to move on and do really great things. Next, to be inclusive, to be open to different perspectives. That ties into the next, making sure that everyone is heard. Don't assume because someone is quiet that they're agreeing with what the rest of the group is saying. You have to actively ask people whether they're on board or whether they have a different opinion, or maybe they have another idea that would be worth sharing. Leadership needs to support all group members. People come at things with very different perceptions, experiences, etc. They have different demands on their time. Good leadership finds a way to support people no matter what. We have to stay positive, knowing that if we can figure out how to work effectively and collaboratively through this phase, that means that we're on our way to becoming a championship team, to delivering a project that is the best that it could possibly be, to making a significant difference for our organization. And the last is we can't rush it. We can't force people to hurry up and be done with storming. Sometimes conflict takes time to resolve, and we need to be comfortable and not try to force the issue. Another model, it's actually my favorite, is called the punctuated equilibrium model. The person who came up with this, her last name was Gerzik. She published this in 1988. And again, I want you to imagine a student project group, a class project, where you start out at the beginning of the semester. And there's actually some level of excitement, right? Just like in the forming stage, where we're thinking, we got this. We're going to get this done. We got a really good crew here. We're going to hand in an awesome paper. Maybe we'll finish it early, right? Okay. And everyone's go, go, go. And then there's kind of this flat, what you see here, sort of this flat, not a whole lot going on. Okay. Not a whole lot going on. And then there'll be a burst of activity as people get going in. Then there'll be another sort of period of what's called stability here. And then there'll be another burst of activity and then maybe a tapering off. So what's going on? Well, deadlines. That's what's going on. Deadlines incentivize behavior. Deadlines get us moving. Example, about halfway through the semester, it'll dawn on people, holy mackerel, half the semester's gone. We really need to get our act together. Now, why wouldn't people have had their act together before that? Well, basically because they got a lot going on. And when you've got a whole semester to do a project, most of us look at that and go, that means we got time. We got time. So the first half of the semester, it's not unusual for people to not do a ton of work on the project. But halfway through the semester, all of a sudden it occurs to people, holy moly, we've only got 7 weeks left, or however much time is left. So you'll see this burst of activity. And then this inertia again. Because once again, people have busy lives. They've got other things going on, other things that might draw their attention. Other deadlines that are set even sooner than the deadline for this particular project. And so we'll still have activity going on, but not a high level of activity until we get within the last couple of weeks, the last quarter, the final 2 minutes. And all of a sudden, holy moly, once again, we better get going. And boom, there's this huge burst of energy and activity. It's the last 2 weeks, I'm sorry, of a semester when holy people are juggling like crazy, right? And you've got all these projects and you'll get them all done. Now you might say to yourself, man, what if we worked that hard the whole semester? What could we get done then? Yeah, I mean, you can dream about that sort of thing, but that's not reality. Reality is people sort of take breaks when it comes to projects. That's normal. And it's deadlines that really motivate people in groups to get moving and to get things done. So if you really want to get people going, what you do is you set intermediate deadlines. That's the secret. Intermediate deadlines where, maybe at the end of the semester, that's when the full project needs to be submitted, but maybe halfway through the semester, people have to submit a rough draft. Maybe they have to do a walkthrough of the presentation at some earlier time. Maybe they have to submit all of their references. Who knows? The point being, you have intermediate deadlines that will help to keep people focused and continue to help them see that this project is a priority. I love this model because it's so real. And when you understand that this is how human beings in groups operate, well, then, as a boss, one of the things you've got to do is set deadlines. Next topic, cohesion. Cohesion is all about stickiness. To cohere is to stick. Here, we're talking about the degree of camaraderie within a group, the extent to which a group sticks together. There's a line, the more cohesive a group is, the more productive it will be and the more rewarding the experience. This is not always true. This is just laid out for you in the text. Like, cohesion in and of itself is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, that's not true. And I'm gonna explain why in just a bit. Before I do that, though, you might also ask, well, how could we help our group to be more cohesive? Well, groups that are more similar, that are more stable, that aren't very big, that have a lot of support, and that have a satisfying agenda, guess what? They tend to be more cohesive. These are all good things, right? So what do we need to do if you want to create and maintain a cohesive team, a group that sticks together? Again, imagine your favorite athletic team. Imagine your favorite project team. Well, one of the things we want to do is align the group with the greater organization. Get their goals to align with the goals of the greater organization. Let the members of the group have some choices in terms of setting their goals. Define really clear roles for people. One of the things that really makes good athletic teams work great is that people have very specific roles and they know exactly what role they have and also what other people have. And they know how the roles work together. That's key. And that's something that is often neglected when project groups are coming together. People don't specify what the different roles will be. And so people aren't really sure who's responsible for what. In terms of the physical aspect of trying to create a cohesive team, one should try to situate group members so that they're in close proximity to each other. That gives them opportunities for sort of natural back and forth conversation. And we frankly tend to view as more important, more interesting, et cetera, the people that we see all the time. Make sure that as a leader, you're giving people frequent praise. That's positive reinforcement, right? Treat everyone with dignity and respect, celebrate their differences, and establish some rituals. For example, ways that we start our meetings, ways that we end our meetings, different touch points that are important to the group, maybe some ritualistic statement that the group makes together. whatever, it doesn't matter, as long as there's some kind of common ritual. And now we're back to the question that I said I would explain. Can a group have too much cohesion? The answer is yeah. Internal pressure to conform can cause people to avoid conflict. They just want to be seen as getting along, to focus more on trying to please each other rather than trying to accomplish the overall goal. And people will censor themselves to maintain the party line. In other words, they'll shut themselves up. So it looks like the group or the team is unified. We call this groupthink, and we'll talk more about this in chapter 11. Essentially, this phenomenon, which is not a good thing, groupthink is bad, increases the risk of the group making really bad, stupid decisions. And I'm going to give you some examples when we get to chapter 11. Basically, we allow ourselves to no longer be mentally efficient. We don't test reality. We don't make sure that we're thinking about the ethics of any of our decisions. We're just trying to get along because the last thing we want to do is, as an example, narc on someone who's in our inner circle. We don't want to be the person who tells somebody outside of the group that the group has a problem, for example. Yeah, like I said, we'll come back to this. When cohesion is bad, what happens? Well, so we've got low group cohesion, high group cohesion on the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, low task commitment, high task commitment. If you've got a group where the cohesion is low, so they don't stick together that great, and the people in the group aren't very committed to getting the job done or doing it well, you're not going to get very good performance. When you have low group cohesion, so people don't really stick together, and you have high task commitment, so most of the people really want to do a good job, well, because the cohesion isn't what it could be, you're going to have a mixed bag of performance. If you have high group cohesion, where people really stick together, they support each other, and everybody is really committed to the task, that's over here, right? Man, that is the championship team. That's the best possible performance. This is, in the Tuckman model, this would be the performing stage. But what about when you've got high group cohesion and low task commitment? In other words, these people stick together like glue, and they don't want to do the job, or they don't want to do it well. What should we expect in terms of performance? Low, the worst. These people will actively do everything they can to not do a good job. They will slow each other down on purpose. Happily so. This is not good for the organization, right? Hence the point. Cohesion in and of itself is not good or bad. It also depends on whether people are committed to the task. Together, that's going to drive performance. Another topic, social loafing, basically slacking off. This is the tendency of people to put in less effort when they're working in a group context. As the size of the group gets bigger, the effect of social loafing becomes larger, meaning basically it's easier for people to slack off. You got more and more and more people, it's easier for people to goof off. Essentially, this is rooted in the perception that one will receive neither one's fair share of rewards if the group is successful, nor blame if the group fails. So who cares? Are you with me? Who cares? Frankly, there are too many people for the job. And so it's easy to goof off, to slack off. How can we prevent social loafing or slacking off? Well, choose carefully the number of people we have in our group. Never have more people in the group than are absolutely needed to do the job. Otherwise, somebody's going to slack off because they can. It's rational behavior at that point. Be sure to clearly define what each person is supposed to be doing in front of everyone so everyone knows exactly who's doing what, who's responsible for what. Design and communicate to everyone a system for evaluating each person's contribution. So you're not just looking at the group outcome, the group performance, but also what each individual is doing. With all of that in mind, also work on building a cohesive group, and we talked about what that takes. Then, this one, my favorite, as you might imagine, assign tasks that are highly engaging and inherently rewarding. Try to come up with stuff that people will want to do no matter what. It's intrinsically interesting. This follows on the principle if you want people to be motivated, if you want people to choose to be motivated, what do we have to do? What have I said? We have to give them a good job. Same here. The group's job, as it were, has to be a good one. The individual's contributions to that group job also have to be good. So remember what that is: skill variety, task identity, task significance, autonomy, feedback. Yeah, that's all still part of the equation here. And then finally, make sure that people know they're needed. Otherwise, it's really easy for people to think, nah, I don't need to be there. No one will even know if I'm not doing my part. It won't matter. Once people start to feel like that, well, you can pretty much predict with 100% guarantee, yeah, they're going to slack off. The final topic in this section, collective efficacy. We talked earlier in the term about self-efficacy. That's that task-specific self-confidence. Well, this is simply the group's perception of its group ability to perform well. Do we see ourselves as a winning team? Are we the best? What influences this perception? Well, watching others, the verbal persuasion that a boss might offer, and then how the person feels. Do they feel like, wow, these people have my back? I feel like we together can do anything. That championship is ours. This project will be the best that's ever been done in this organization because we, everybody on my team, this group, we have all kinds of confidence in ourselves as a group. And voila, we come to the final slide and we're done with part one.